Do you ever find yourself trapped in endless cycles of analysis? Have you discovered that deeper comprehension makes existence more challenging rather than easier? Maybe you've observed that certain discussions feel hollow, that those surrounding you seem content with shallow devotions while you increasingly feel like an outsider. The reality is that intellectual capacity comes with a cost, one that remains largely unspoken. Arthur Schopenhauer, among history's most pessimistic and unflinching philosophers, viewed intelligence not as a blessing but as a burden. In his perspective, individuals who perceive reality with greater depth don't experience superior lives. Instead, they endure greater suffering. Such people face misunderstanding, isolation, and rejection from their communities. The fundamental issue is that truth isn't something most desire to encounter. They would rather maintain their pleasant illusions, existing on mental autopilot without ever challenging established beliefs. Those who attempt to shatter these protective bubbles are seen as dangerous. You may have experienced this personally. When you attempt to express a concept or complex idea, you're met with vacant expressions or awkward chuckles. You discover that society lacks patience for profound contemplation. People crave straightforward solutions, effortless entertainment, and devotions that help them forget their mortality. The fault doesn't lie with you. The issue is that most individuals aren't genuinely interested in reality. Truth is disturbing. This brings us to Schopenhauer's profound revelation. Enhanced intelligence makes finding your place in society increasingly difficult. A sharp mind becomes a curse because it shatters comforting illusions. When you recognize that everything surrounding you, social structures, relationships, human aspirations, rests on deception and self-delusion, you face a critical decision: pretend blindness or embrace the solitude that accompanies deep thinking. If you've ever sensed that your intellectual abilities create distance between you and others, that your worldview leads you to question things others seem to ignore, then these insights are meant for you. Today, we'll examine Schopenhauer's concealed wisdom, a revelation that might fundamentally alter how you perceive your own consciousness. After understanding this, you might never desire heightened intelligence again. If you felt that your intellectual capacity separates you from others, this isn't mere imagination, it's reality. Schopenhauer not only recognized this phenomenon but philosophically demonstrated why it occurs. According to his analysis, elevated intelligence doesn't unite people. Rather, it creates profound divisions. Consider moments when you attempted to explain something deeper to someone and realized they simply couldn't follow your reasoning. Perhaps you discussed literature, philosophical concepts, or subtle life observations. Instead of engagement, you encountered boredom, irritation, or contempt. This occurs because most people resist deep thinking. They prefer simple explanations, uncomplicated narratives, and a reality that doesn't challenge their established beliefs. Schopenhauer believed that superior intelligence creates isolation because society functions on superficial levels. He compared human consciousness to maritime vessels. Most people navigate close to shore in shallow, predictable waters. Meanwhile, the more intelligent are driven into open seas, vast, profound, and lonely territories. While others enjoy themselves near the beach, carefree and comfortable, those who see further must confront the terrifying immensity of existence. This explains why exceptionally intelligent individuals often feel displaced. They perceive societal flaws, behavioral contradictions, and the meaninglessness of certain pursuits. When they attempt to warn others, they realize few want to listen. Worse, those who challenge collective ignorance are labeled arrogant, pessimistic, or threatening. This isolation extends beyond social boundaries. It's deeply emotional. Schopenhauer argued that intelligence brings heightened sensitivity. More intelligent people don't just understand more, they experience more intensely. They perceive injustices with greater clarity, suffer when witnessing hypocrisy, and struggle to accept mediocrity. This creates a vicious cycle. The more intelligent you become, the more deeply you feel the world's pain, yet the less you can share this burden with others. If isolation seems cruel enough, Schopenhauer warns of something far worse, the unavoidable anguish that accompanies intelligence. He believed human suffering directly correlates with perceptual capacity. The deeper your understanding of reality, the more reasons you have for frustration, disappointment, and anxiety. Ignorance, conversely, shields people, allowing them to exist in a state of existential numbness. Why does intelligence generate suffering? The primary reason is evident: reality is harsh. Most people spend their lives pursuing pleasure, distraction, and meaning through superficial elements: wealth, status, empty relationships, religious doctrines. For Schopenhauer, these represent fragile illusions. The wise individual, one who perceives reality clearly, recognizes how arbitrary and temporary these desires are. They see that existence is driven by chaos, chance, and human irrationality. This understanding destroys the ability to deceive oneself and believe in just order or supreme purpose guiding life. The second source of wise suffering is frustration with mediocrity. Schopenhauer argued that most people operate at diminished mental levels, not because they lack thinking capacity, but because they refuse to engage it. They choose easier paths, accept predetermined answers, and avoid reflection that might force them to examine their lives. The intelligent person cannot escape this questioning. They see beyond surface appearances and recognize the world's hypocrisy and contradictions. When they attempt to share this vision, they almost invariably encounter resistance, disdain, or hostility. History overflows with examples of thinkers who faced rejection, persecution, and ridicule simply for seeing beyond the obvious. Socrates received a death sentence for challenging ancient Athenian beliefs. Nietzsche was treated as insane for exposing traditional morality's fragility. Giordano Bruno was burned alive for asserting universal infinity. These individuals didn't suffer because they were wrong, they suffered because they were correct too early. They perceived truths that society wasn't prepared to accept. This leads to the third and most cruel source of wise suffering: existential loneliness. A highly intelligent person might have friends, family, even crowds around them, but at their core, they remain alone. Intelligence creates an invisible barrier between them and the world. They may attempt to explain their anguish, reflections, and deepest doubts, but complete understanding remains elusive. This chasm between profound perception and collective superficiality represents one of a brilliant mind's greatest torments. If intelligence leads to isolation and suffering, then logic suggests the opposite must be true. Less intelligent people appear more satisfied with existence. They worry less about existential matters, don't waste time reflecting on life's futility, and find pleasure in simple things: disposable entertainment, trivial conversations, predictable routines. Is ignorance truly a blessing? Schopenhauer believed so. For him, happiness and intelligence exist in inverse proportion. The more someone understands reality's nature, the harder finding joy becomes. In contrast, those who live without questioning simply flow with life, unburdened by excessively deep thought. While a wise person anguishes over existence's temporary nature, an ordinary person finds satisfaction in momentary distractions. While philosophers reflect on society's emptiness, most people occupy themselves with trivialities and daily concerns. This occurs because human brains weren't designed to seek truth, they were designed for survival. Ordinary people live guided by what Schopenhauer called the will to live, a blind impulse driving us to pursue pleasure and avoid pain. Questioning this process too extensively generates suffering because it dismantles life-sustaining illusions. Consider how society glorifies the pursuit of success, love, and status. This functions as grand collective theater, keeping people occupied. Intelligent individuals realize that ultimately, all of this is temporary and often meaningless. But in recognizing this, they disconnect from the naive joy that motivates others. This phenomenon appears at every life level. In social settings, the most popular and beloved people aren't necessarily the most intelligent, but the most charismatic, those who know how to play social games without questioning the roles. In professional environments, those who succeed often aren't the deepest thinkers, but those who adapt best to systems, follow orders without hesitation, and don't become paralyzed by excessive reflection. In love, those experiencing intense, joyful romances often aren't the ones analyzing every detail, but those who surrender fearlessly to momentary illusions. This presents a disturbing dilemma. To be happy, must one abandon intelligence? Is the only way to live without anguish to settle for superficial reality views? For Schopenhauer, this represented the great tragedy of human existence. Those who think too much suffer, while those who don't think live in illusion. Therefore, he believed wise people shouldn't seek happiness in the same places as others. If happiness lies in ignorance, then intelligent individuals aren't just strangers in society, they're threats. And like any threat, they must be neutralized. Since ancient times, humanity has followed a perverse pattern. Whenever someone sees beyond the obvious and attempts to expose uncomfortable truths, that person is silenced, ridiculed, or destroyed. Schopenhauer understood this cruel social mechanism. For him, collective mediocrity always feels deep discomfort in the presence of different thinkers. The reason is clear: they challenge the illusions in which everyone prefers to live. While the majority distracts itself with trivialities, thinkers point out existence's absurdity, institutional hypocrisy, and human ambition's futility. Since most people don't want to face this truth, the easiest solution is attacking those who reveal it. History provides countless examples. Socrates was sentenced to death for corrupting youth, essentially for teaching people to think independently. Galileo faced persecution for asserting that birth revolved around the sun, challenging comfortable religious beliefs. Nietzsche was ridiculed for exposing moral values' fragility and ended up isolated in madness. Schopenhauer himself spent much of his life ignored, his philosophy considered too pessimistic for society. Don't assume this phenomenon only affects great philosophers and scientists. It happens constantly at every life level. Notice how social groups tend to reject those who don't conform. At work, employees who question unfair roles quickly become problems. In school, students who don't accept easy answers get labeled arrogant or weird. In social interactions, those preferring deep conversations over trivialities often feel out of place. The world doesn't want you to think, it wants you to obey. Here lies the great irony: people reject thinkers while simultaneously depending on them. All great innovations, revolutionary ideas, and changes that truly shaped humanity came from individuals who were, at some point, marginalized for their intelligence. The problem is that society only values genius after death, when ideas no longer represent threats. If intelligence leads to isolation, suffering, and rejection, the crucial question becomes: is there an escape? How can someone who sees beyond society's illusions find peace in a world that seems to have no place for them? Schopenhauer believed there was only one way: stop seeking happiness in the same places as others. Most people find life's meaning through distractions, careers, relationships, social status. They're trapped in the idea that happiness lies in others' recognition, group acceptance, and material desire fulfillment. But for intelligent individuals, all of this sounds empty. They realize that success often depends not on merit, but on the ability to conform to social gain roles. They see that relationships can be based on projections and interests, and that incessant pleasure-seeking is merely an attempt to escape existential emptiness. So what's the alternative? Schopenhauer believed the only way to survive one's own intelligence was to radically change living approaches. For him, wise people should abandon the need for external approval and seek satisfaction in areas where society's mediocrity cannot interfere. This means three things. First, embrace solitude as freedom. Most people fear being alone because, without distractions, they're forced to confront themselves. But Schopenhauer saw solitude as a privilege. He argued that truly intelligent people are never lonely because their own minds are rich enough universes to explore without constant need for company. Instead of being distressed by lack of superficial connections, wise people should use their time for reflection, study, and self-knowledge. Second, seek refuge in art and philosophy. For Schopenhauer, the only truly pure human experiences are those that don't serve practical purposes, such as art and philosophical contemplation. He believed music, for example, was the highest art form because it allowed humans to transcend brutal reality and access something deeper. Instead of getting caught up in worldly concerns, wise people should take refuge in activities that expand their minds without requiring social approval. Third, reject the illusion of happiness and accept serenity. The greatest mistake of intelligent people, according to Schopenhauer, is trying to find happiness in the same molds as common society. Intelligence makes individuals realize that complete happiness is an illusion, and the sooner they accept this, the freer they become. The goal isn't to seek artificial happiness, but to achieve serenity, avoiding excessive involvement with the world's trivialities and finding pleasure in existence itself without relying on external factors. This philosophy may seem harsh, even cruel, but there's something liberating about it. When you stop seeking from the world something it can never give you, you free yourself. You stop getting frustrated with people, institutions, and systems. You accept reality as it is and learn to live on its margins without being controlled by it. What is the true destiny of those who see beyond? If they cannot fit into society, if conventional happiness eludes them, if their minds are both gifts and curses, what is the inevitable end for those who refuse to live in illusion? Schopenhauer had no romantic illusions about this destiny. He knew that intelligence, when taken to its ultimate consequences, condemns individuals to solitude and misunderstanding. Thinkers will never find comfort in ordinary life's distractions, will never be fully accepted by those who live automatically. But does this mean they're doomed to suffering? Not necessarily. The true secret lies not in trying to escape this burden, but in learning to carry it with dignity. The person who understands existence's nature and accepts reality as it is, without the layers of illusion that most people need to endure life, achieves a kind of freedom that few will know. They don't seek meaning outside themselves, don't care for others' approval, don't allow themselves to be enslaved by incessant desire for more. They understand that the world has always been chaotic, unjust, and indifferent, and by accepting this, they become immune to disappointments that destroy others. Schopenhauer believed wise people should abandon any hope of transforming society or being understood by it. Instead, they should dedicate themselves to cultivating their own minds, appreciating art, philosophy, and contemplation. They should be spectators of the world, not prisoners of it. But this conclusion raises an uncomfortable question: is it worth being intelligent? If ignorance brings happiness and wisdom brings isolation, is the pursuit of knowledge a rational choice? Or should we choose to remain in illusion like everyone else, if we could? The answer, perhaps, lies not in the destination but in the journey itself. For those who cannot help but see, who cannot turn away from truth, who cannot find satisfaction in shallow waters, there is no real choice. Intelligence isn't something you can simply discard once you possess it. The question then becomes not whether it's worth being intelligent, but how to live with intelligence in a way that honors both your mind and your humanity. And perhaps, in that acceptance, lies the only authentic peace available to those cursed and blessed with the ability to see beyond a veil. What do you believe? Does intelligence truly condemn one to suffering, or is it possible to be intelligent and still find genuine happiness? The answer may depend not on what we know, but on how we choose to live with what we cannot unknow.